Okay, so after looking at number one, we're looking at number two. Number two says describe the domain of P of X. Domain is all our X values, and we know our X values are the shoes. Can you ever make half a shoe? No, the whole shoe has to be made. You can never make a negative amount of shoes. So we know that it's not all integers because they can't be negative. Integers are -1, -2, -3, 1, 2, 3. Can't be all real numbers because you can't make a half a shoe. You can't make a third a shoe. It is not all positive real numbers just for the same reason. It can't be 1.5 shoes are made. So it's just leaving C as all positive integers. Number three says the table to the right describes the profit made by the shoe company by making various pairs of shoes. What is the average rate of change? So that's an important word for the profit from X equals 100 pairs to X equals 200 pairs of shoes. And what are the units? So we're going to pick two answers there because it's giving you two questions. It wants to know the average rate of change. Average rate of change is slope. And it's just specifically asking for the slope from X is 100 to X is 200. We can determine the slope by just looking at the table. And that's something to get used to when you go to take the NJSLA is whenever you see a table, one of the first things you want to do is figure out what the change from each would be or what the slope would be. So from 100 to 200, we know that is 100 change. We're adding in 100 to it. 50 to 450 is a change of 400. We always have y over x. So then we have 400 over 100. And 400 over 100 simplifies to 4. So we know B is an answer. And then we also know that we make dollars per pair. Because think about it, dollars is profit. Profit is our Y, so dollars is on top. X is the pair of shoes. So we make $4 for one pair of shoes. What type of function best describes the pattern in the table? We can determine it by looking at the table. We see that it jumps 100 every time, and over here it jumps 400 every time. So we know it's a linear function because our slope is the same throughout. And if we were to graph it, it would form a line. Number 5 says, for what value of A in the table would P of X fail to meet the definition of a function? For something to fail the definition of a function, it means that you cannot repeat any of the numbers that are already in the table. You can't have more than one X for one Y. So we look, and the first thing I want to look at is to see if any of these numbers show up in my multiple choice. I can make 0 pairs of shoes and make no money. 700 would be a next one. 2,450 would be there, but however, 300 shows up in both. So 300 would fail because you can't make 300 pairs of shoes and have a profit of $850 and then make 300 pairs of shoes again and make a profit of $2,100. It just doesn't work. Write the function that best describes the function shown in the table. We know it's a linear function, so we know it's y equals mx plus b. Whenever we are figuring out what the slope and the y-intercept is, we can always look at the table. It's our easiest way. We know from number 3 that our slope is 4. So we know m equals 4. I'm just going to write it all in the box. M equals 4. But I also need to figure out what my b is. B means y-intercept. It's where it would cross the y-axis. So your x would be 0. You can sit there and plug numbers in, but we can also just look at the table. If I went 100 more up top, I would have 0 pairs of shoes. Yes? And 0 in my X column means whatever value I would put here is my y-intercept. So if I were to take 50 and subtract 400 from it to get the next value on top, it'd be a negative 350. Because think about negative 350 plus 400 is 50. So this right here is my y-intercept. So P of x equals 4x minus 350, since my b was a negative 350. That one was an easy one to figure out because I can look at the table and just subtract up until I get an x is 0. The last two you need a little more work for. And it says, I'm going to add some space. It says use the function you created above to predict the profit made by making 1,000 pair of shoes. So I know that this is my function. I want to make 1,000 pairs of shoes. 1,000 is my X, which we talked about at the beginning. It even tells you in this table, 1,000 pairs of shoes. Pairs is your X. So I can replace the 1,000 here. But the more important part is replacing the 1,000 here. So 4 times 1,000 is 4,000. And I want to subtract 350 from it. When I do that, I end up getting $3,650, which is answer B. Number 8 says, use the function you created above to predict the minimum pairs of shoes that company must make for profit to exceed $5,000. So I'm trying to make $5,000, so that's my Y, so I take this again. I'm trying to figure out the number of pairs of shoes, so I'm not losing my X. My X is staying. I want to exceed 5,000. So my 5,000 is my P of X or my Y, and I just start the math. I add 350 to both sides. 4x equals 5,350. And then when I divide by 4, I get x equals 1,337.5. However, I can't make half a pair of shoes, which means I have to round up to the whole to exceed the 5,000, which means my x, or my number of pairs of shoes, is B. Those are all the questions that go with situation 1. Your other question for homework was number 9, which was which of the following describes the solution set to the inequality 2x plus 4y is less than or equal to 12. I can solve this by first putting my equation in y equals mx plus b form. I can determine the y-intercept, I can determine the slope, and then I can determine the shading from there. So I'm going to do the math on this before we start picking. So it's 2x plus 4y is less than or equal to 12. First thing I want to do is subtract the mx, or my 2x, to the other side. 4y is less than or equal to negative 2x plus 12. Now I'm going to divide everything by 4. Cancels there. y is less than or equal to -2 divided by 4 simplifies to -1/2 x. 12 divided by 4 simplifies to 3. I am looking for a negative slope, so a downwards line, and a y-intercept of 3. Let's see which one looks the most like that. I'm going to write this at the top so we know what we're looking for. Okay, so automatically I can eliminate A because it's a positive slope, so that one goes away. I can automatically get rid of B because it's also a positive slope. That line is going upwards. So I can cancel that one and get rid of that. Now I got to choose between C and D. Remember, we can determine which way to shade based off of a test point. I will always use 0, 0 unless it falls on the line. Here it doesn't fall on the line, so that's the one I'm going to use. I am going to plug in 0, 0 into this equation. 0 is less than or equal to -1/2 times 0 plus 3. Is 0 less than or equal to 0 plus 3? Is 0 less than or equal to 3? Yes, that is true, which means my shading needs to include 0, 0. So if I look, my shading here, 0, 0 is a part of it. So I select D. D is my answer. Okay, look for the next video to help you with the next set of homework problems.